Okay, the question was, how do I know that the Masorah that we have from Moshe Rabbeinu was authentic? Okay, the answer to that is as follows. I can't prove it, but I can tell you this. HaKadosh Baruch Hu went to considerable lengths to deal with this question. He made it that all of Klal Yisrael had the same level of nevuah that Moshe Rabbeinu had, except Moshe Rabbeinu had it, for 40 years, non-stop, and Klal Yisrael had it for a 2-minute blurb at Sinai. But they had the same level of nevuah. They, for that short period of time, were let into a world where God actually communicated with them on the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. They heard every word, and they saw that Moshe Rabbeinu was the Navi on Har Sinai. They saw HaKadosh Baruch Hu communicate with them and with Moshe Rabbeinu, and they saw and heard the words of the Ribbanu Shalom themselves. They were privy to the idea, and they saw firsthand that Moshe Rabbeinu was then going to be the giver of the rest of the Torah. They only heard two of the Ten Commandments, and the rest was going to be given through Moshe Rabbeinu, along with all the rest. When Moshe Rabbeinu, therefore, that established Moshe Rabbeinu as a absolute Navi. Now, what I mean by that is that there was no other Navi in the history of mankind that was proven to be a Navi, except for him. Okay? In other words, we were eyewitness that Moshe Rabbeinu was a Navi. Okay? It wasn't, well, he's a holy Khandi guy, and he wears these holy robes, and da-da-da. Right? And he has all these visions, and he has all these sayings. He probably is a Navi, right? No. He is definitely a Navi. We can prove that. We know for 100% fact. There were 2.5 million people who testified that he was a Navi. Okay? Now that's different categorically than any other Navi in history. Every other Navi, we only know that they're a Navi because in this week's Parsha and in last week's Parsha, the Pasuk starts telling me, if a Navi comes up and he tells you this and this is how you can tell whether he's a real Navi, whether he's legit, or whether he's for the birds. Right? How do I know every other Navi? Because Moshe told me the way to find out. You hear that? Did you catch that? Okay? Moshe Rabbeinu, that is the reason why the Rambam refers to Moshe Rabbeinu as the Av HaNavim. He's the father of all Navim. What do you mean he's the father of all Navim? What is that supposed to mean? He's the father of Avraham Avinu? I think you got the years wrong, right? He was the father of Avraham Avinu. No, what it means is, because Moshe Rabbeinu was the only one who we can testify he's a Navi. We know for a fact. It's through Moshe Rabbeinu that we know all the other Navim. You follow? I know that Avraham Avinu was a Navi because the Torah tells me, which was authored through Moshe Rabbeinu, that the Torah tells me that HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke to Avraham Avinu. So Moshe Rabbeinu tells me that Avraham Avinu was a Navi. Otherwise, I wouldn't know. Right? That's right. Av LaNavim. He was the father. It doesn't just mean he was the greatest of all. He was the source of them all. Now, the second thing is, now once we've established that, the second thing is that Moshe Rabbeinu was entrusted to give over the Torah in its entirety, shebichsav v'shebal peh. That was not given As my Rabbi Weinberg said, Moshe Rabbeinu's Bechira, his free choice, was removed from him when he was giving over the Torah. When he gave Shir, Moshe Rabbeinu was no longer a normal human being who had free choice and it was dependent on his memory and this and that and the other thing. No. He was forced. He had no choice. He had to give it over, and he was given over. He was a mouthpiece of the Rebbeinu Shalom. He was a human mouthpiece. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu's Mesorah was not mistaken. We know for a fact. Now, the question that we have is, could we, after Moshe Rabbeinu, could we keep that Mesorah carefully? What we got from Moshe Rabbeinu in the 40 years of the desert was precise. He got it straight from the Lord. It was precise. What happened after that, now it became a little bit of a game of telephone. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that everybody knows that a game of telephone doesn't work so well. So Chazal went to extreme lengths to try to keep it as best as we could. But it is true that the Gemara says that errors come in, especially things which were somewhat unusual and didn't come up very often, and there were places for mistakes that occurred, etc., etc. So the only thing that we have is the establishment of the Mishnah as the accepted, when Rabbi Yehuda Nasi created the Mishnah, he gathered together all the sages of Israel and he tried to iron out all of the Mesorahs that had been given through the ages. Tried to iron out and work that out and tried to make sure that it was accurate as it possibly could be. And if there was a machlokas, he recorded it often. And the same thing similarly happened with the Gemara when they created Talmud Bavli. Some 300 and something years later, 312 years later, they did the same thing. Ravina and Ravashi gathered all of the sages of Israel and tried to make sure to iron out that thing. Was it perfect? No. Could it be perfect? No. Was it darn good? Yes. It was as good as humanly possible at the time. All of halacha is based, and all of our Mesorah is based on those two works, the Mishnah and the Talmud. Because those are the things that we know were established by sort of an act of Beis-Din of the times, that these, we know, these are legit. This is bona fide, this is legit. After that, it is our job to try to understand it, try to build on it, try to figure out what it meant, and you have all the commentaries thereafter trying to figure out what it means. Okay? If two people are arguing, and one person can say, you don't know what you're talking about, the Gemara says explicitly not like you. If he can prove without any question that the Gemara says differently than him, he's wrong. Because the Gemara is the source for everything. If that other party could possibly say, the Gemara is not different than what I say, the Gemara means such and such and such and such. That's how you understood the Gemara? That's not how you understand the Gemara. The Gemara means this. No, the Gemara means this. Oh. So now I can't prove you wrong. Now it's a question of, is your interpretation correct or not? Right? Because now at least you're basing it on the Gemaras. Right? You're basing it on the Mishnah, on the Gemaras. Okay, now it's a question of what do they mean? You know where this happens all the time? In a Tosas. Okay? Tosas does this all the time. Because what happens is that Rashi says the Gemara means such and such and such and such, right? And then Tosa says, 1 second over here. That's not what it means. Because I have this question, I have this question, this question. That's impossible that that's what the Gemara meant. Right? So I'm sorry, Grandpa, but you got it wrong. That's not what the Gemara means. The Gemara means such and such. Okay? Now, that means that Rashi's grandchildren, whatever, mostly Rabbeinu Tam, the Rabbeinu Yitzchak, who was his great-grandson, whatever, they argued with Grandpa about what the Gemara means. Now, they had the advantage of coming after Rashi. I am next to certain that had Rashi been around, he would have told them a thing or two or three about excuse me, that is not what the Gemara means. But meanwhile, so it's a machlokas Rashi and Tosas and how to interpret this Gemara. This happens on virtually every page of Shas. Okay? Well, what I just told you is not an unusual scenario. It happens all the time. Right?
Sometimes we question like Rashi.
Oh, and then, and then that's where the fun begins because, then all the later commentaries jump into the fray. And they yeah, right, exactly, right? They jump into the fray and they start saying, this is how Rashi understood it because Rashi said it like this. Rabbi Tam understands it like this because he's understanding it like this. And let's see how the Rambam understood it. And it's a lot of fun.
John Smith comes along in 2021 and says, working on Shabbos, right? Says you shouldn't work on Shabbos. That was when they had to have flint. And that was hard work. So, but today, turning on a car, it's not hard. It's not work. I can go shopping on. So it's my interpretation. I interpret, because rabbis interpreted, right?
Right.
I interpret work as flint, and that was hard. But today, turning on a car is not hard. So I am entitled, John Smith, to give you an interpretation. My interpretation is that today a person could drive on Saturday. Am I allowed to do that?
How about thinking
No, you're not allowed to do that. The reason why you're not allowed to do that,
Can you repeat my question?
okay, your question was how come we can't, I'm rephrasing your question, how come we can't interpret just like the Mishnah and the Gemara, how come we can't interpret it also like that? The reason is because, you can interpret everything you want, and, in Yiddish they say, it's just kimt from boich, right? It comes from your belly, right? Everybody wants to interpret. They can interpret whatever they want. They can interpret. They could, they could say that the moon is green. I mean, they can say whatever they want to say. Now, because everything we know that the Torah is based on the Masorah of Moshe Rabbeinu as presented in Mishnah and Gemara. So if you are interpreting something which is not represented by the Torah Shebechsav and the Torah Shebal as developed in the Shas and the Mishnah and the Gemara, and subsequently the Mefarshim who explain that, so then, sorry, Charlie, you're making up your own Torah. You want to make up your own Torah? Okay, I guess, in America it's a democracy. You're allowed to make up you want, but don't call that Judaism. Call that Smithism. Call that whatever you want, but it ain't Judaism.
And we can discuss on what basis we decide if Lamed Malachos are Asur.
That we have a Masorah. Again, how do you know that the 39 Malachos are Azar? We have a Masorah. That's part of Torah Shebal Peh. That we have a Masorah that there are 39 Malachos. Parenthetically, I will just tell you that you use that as an example. It's very curious. Everybody knows that there are 39 categories of work, right? If you look in the Gemara in Shabbos, the Gemara says that there are, how do I know that there are 39 things of work? So the Gemara brings one hint this way and another thing hint this way, and one's a gematria, and one's this, and one's that. 39 Malachos. 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 39 But nobody ever argued that there were 39, right? Exactly what the Rambam had said, right? We know that there are 39 because the boss said so. And there ain't no discussions. Their boss said so. You want to know how do you see it in the psukim? Well, this, that's sort of a side point, right? There are 39 because there are 39 because that's what the boss said, right? So that's it. There's no ifs, buts, and maybes. There are 39, right? Now it's only a question of, okay, let's sit down and work out all the details of the 39. But I know that there are 39. And these are the rules. Okay? So Judaism is defined by Mishnah and Gemara and the later commentaries, and basically encapsulated in what we know as Shulchan Aruch. Okay? If you want to interpret anything else, you're welcome to interpret it. It's America. It's a free country. It's a democracy. You're allowed to do whatever you want, right? However, don't call it Judaism. It's not Judaism. Call it whatever you want, but it ain't Judaism. If it's Judaism, it's here. Gentlemen, have a wonderful day.